Hello, Ruandri. If you're looking for a quiet corner of the internet where you can rest your tired mind and heart, I'm here for you. Come sit with me. My name is Danal, and I'm gonna read you some stories while you hold yourself a little tighter. Okay. Before we start, I'd like to tell a short story. Um, I like it when I witness deeply human moments. So, my mom used to take a route to work that she passed by a robot, a traffic light, where a man sells newspapers. He still stands there, but she doesn't go by that route anymore. So this one time, her well, she made coffee for him in a travel mug and a sandwich. It was in the winter time and it was really really cold. So she made him this and the next day he brought the travel mug back and it was obviously cleaned, and the next day she made him coffee again, and the next day she would bring it back, and so forth they went. And it's not uncommon for um, people in very low wage jobs like that to ask for birthday box or Christmas box during December time. And my mom's birthday is in December, and he asked her once for a contribution to his Christmas box. And my mom told him, "Yeah, sure." And she gave him the change that she could spare. And jokingly, she told him that tomorrow's my birthday. You must get me something. Obviously, not seriously expecting him to buy her anything, but just to say to him that it was her birthday. And he says to her, "Ma'am, I got you tomorrow. I got you." And we laugh and we went to work. And the next day, when he saw her, he says, "Ma'am, I got you. You must wait." And he quickly goes to the place on the pavement where he put his things down. And he brought my mom a bouquet of white lilies. It was so beautiful of him, just this small gesture that he really appreciated what my mom did for him. So I thought that was really beautiful, and I thought that I'd like to share that. Okay, we're reading The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Martha was waiting for her, and the trouble in her face had been temporarily replaced by interest and curiosity. There was a wooden box on the table, and its cover had been removed and revealed that it was full of neat packages. "Mr. Craven sent it to you," said Martha. "It looks as if it had picture books in it." Mary remembered that he had asked her the day she had gone to his room, "Do you want anything? Dolls, toys, books?" She opened the package, wondering if he had sent a doll, and also wondering what she should do with it if he had. But he had not sent one. There were several beautiful books, such as Colin had, and two of them were about gardens and were full of pictures. There were two or three games, and there was a beautiful writing case with a gold monogram on it and a gold pen and inkstand. Everything was so nice that her pleasure began to crowd her anger out of her mind. She had not expected him to remember her at all, and her hard little heart grew quite warm. "I can write better than I can print," she said, "and the first thing I shall write with that pen will be a letter to tell him I am much obliged." If she had been friends with Colin, she would have run to show him her presents at once, and they would have looked at pictures and read some of the gardening books and perhaps tried playing the games, and he would have enjoyed himself so much he would never once have thought he was going to die or have put his hand on his spine to see if there was a lump coming. He had a way of doing that which she could not bear. It gave her an uncomfortable frightened feeling because he always looked so frightened himself. He said that if he felt quite a little lump some day he would know his hunch had begun to grow. Something he had heard Mrs. Medlock whispering to the nurse had given him the idea, and he had thought over it in secret until it was quite firmly fixed in his mind. Mrs. Medlock had said his father's back had begun to show its crookedness in that way when he was a child. He had never told anyone but Mary that most of his tantrums, as they called them, grew out of his hysterical hidden fear. Mary had been sorry for him when he had told her. He always began to think about it when he was cross or tired, she said to herself, and he had been cross today. Perhaps, perhaps he had been thinking about it all afternoon. She stood still, looking down at the carpet and thinking. "I said I would never go back again," she hesitated, knitting her brows. "But perhaps, just perhaps I will go and see if he wants me. In the morning, perhaps, he'll try to throw his pillow at me again, but I'll think I'll go." Chapter 17. A Tantrum. She had got up very early in the morning and had to work hard in the garden, and she was tired and sleepy, so as soon as Martha had brought her supper and she had eaten it, she was glad to go to bed. As she laid her head on the pillow, she murmured to herself, "I'll go up before breakfast and work with Dickon, and then afterward I believe I'll go see him." She thought it was the middle of the night when she was awakened by such dreadful sounds that she jumped out of bed in an instant. What was it? What was it? The next minute she felt quite sure she knew. Doors were opened and shut, and there were hurrying feet in the corridors, and someone was crying and screaming at the same time, screaming and crying in a horrible way. "It's Colin," she said. "He's having one of those tantrums the nurse called hysterics. How awful it sounds." As she listened to the sobbing screams, she did not wonder that people were so frightened that they gave him his own way in everything rather than hear them. She put her hands over her ears and felt sick and shivering. "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do," she kept saying. "I can't bear it." Once she wondered if he would stop if she dared to go to him, and then she remembered how he had driven her out of the room, and thought that perhaps the sight of her might make him worse. Even when she pressed her hands more tightly over her ears, she could not keep the awful sounds out. She hated them so, and was so terrified by them, that suddenly they began to make her angry, and she felt as if she would like to fly into a tantrum herself, and frighten him as he was frightening her. She was not used to anyone's tempers but her own. She took her hands from her ears and sprang them up and stamped her foot. "He ought to be stopped," Somebody ought to make him stop. Somebody ought to beat him, she cried out. Just then she heard feet almost running down the corridor and her door opened and the nurse came in. She was not she was not laughing now by any means. She even looked rather pale. He's worked himself into hysterics, she said in a great hurry. He'll do himself harm. No one can do anything with him. You come and try like a good child. He likes you. He turned me out of the room this morning, said Mary, stamping her foot with excitement. The stamp rather pleased the nurse. The truth was that she had been afraid she might find Mary crying and hiding her head under the bedclothes. That's right, she said. You're in the right humor. You go and scold him. Give him something new to think of. Do go, child, as quick as you ever can. It was not until afterward that Mary realized that the thing had been funny as well as dreadful. That it was funny that all the grown-up people were so frightened that they came to a little girl just because they guessed she was almost as bad as Colin himself. She flew along the corridor, and the nearer she got to the screams, the higher her temper mounted. She felt quite wicked by the time she reached the door. She slapped it open with her hand and ran across the room to the four-posted bed. You stop! She almost shouted. You stop! I hate you! Everybody hates you! I wish everybody would run out of the house and let you scream yourself to death. You will scream yourself to death in a minute, and I wish you would. A nice sympathetic child could neither have thought nor said such things, but it just happened that the shock of hearing them was the best possible thing for this hysterical boy, whom no one had ever dared to restrain or contradict. He had been lying on his face, beating his pillow with his hands, and he actually almost jumped around. He turned so quickly at the sound of the furious little voice. His face looked dreadful, white and red and swollen, and he was gasping and choking, but savage little Mary did not care an atom. If you scream another scream, she said, I'll scream too, and I can scream louder than you, and I'll frighten you. I'll frighten you. He actually stopped screaming because she had startled him so. The scream which had been coming almost choked him. The tears were streaming down his face, and he shook all over. I can't stop, he gasped and sobbed. I can't. I can't. You can, shouted Mary. Half that ails you is hysterics and temper. Just hysterics, hysterics, hysterics. And she stamped each time she said it. I felt the lump. I felt it, choked out Colin. I knew I should. I shall have a hunch on my back, and then I shall die. And he began to writhe again and turned on his face and sobbed and wailed, but he didn't scream. You didn't feel a lump, contradicted Mary fiercely. If you did, it was only a hysterical lump. Hysterics makes lumps. There's nothing the matter with you, horrid back. Nothing but hysterics. Turn over and let me look at it. She liked the word hysterics, and felt somehow as if it had an effect on him. He was probably like herself and had never heard it before. Nurse, she commanded, come here and show me his back, this minute. The nurse, Mrs. Medlock, and Martha had been standing huddled together near the door staring at her, their mouths half open. All three had gasped with fright more than once. The nurse came forward as if she were half afraid. Colin was heaving with great breathless sobs. Perhaps he won't let me, she hesitated in a low voice. Colin heard her, however, and he gasped out between two sobs. Show her. She'll see then. It was a poor, thin back to look at when it was bared. Every rib could be counted and every joint of the spine, though Mistress Mary did not count them as she bent over and examined them with a solemn, savage little face. She looked so sour and old-fashioned that the nurse turned her head aside to hide her twitching of her mouth. There was just a minute's silence, for even Colin tried to hold his breath, while Mary looked up and down his spine, and "There's not a single lump there," she said at last. "There's not a lump as big as a pin, except backbone bumps. You can only feel them because you're thin. I've got backbone lumps myself, and they used to stick out as much as yours do, until I began to get fatter, and I am not fat enough yet to hide them. There's not a lump as big as a pin. If you ever say there is again, I shall laugh." No one but Colin himself knew what effect those crossly spoken childish words had on him. If he had ever had anyone talk to about his secret terrors, if he had ever dared to let himself ask questions, if he had had childish companions and had not lain on his back on a huge closed house, breathing an atmosphere heavy with the fears of people who were most of them ignorant and tired of him, he would have found out that most of his fright and illness was created by himself. But he had lain and thought of himself and his aches and weariness for hours and days and months and years. And now that an angry, unsympathetic little girl insisted obstinately that he was not as ill as he thought, he was actually felt as if she might be speaking the truth. "I didn't know," ventured the nurse, "that he thought he had a lump on his spine. His back is weak because he won't try to sit up." I could have told him that there was no lump there. Colin gulped and turned his little face to look at her. "Could you?" he said pathetically. "Yes, sir." "There," said Mary, and she gulped too. Colin turned on his face again, and but for his long-drawn broken breaths, which were the dying down of his storm of sobbing, he lay still for a minute, though great tears streamed down his face and wet the pillow. Actually, the tears meant that a curious great relief had come to him. Presently he turned and looked at the nurse again, and strangely enough he was not like a Rajah at all as he spoke to her. "Do you think I could live to grow up?" he said. The nurse was neither clever nor soft-hearted, but she could repeat some of the London doctor's words. "You probably will if you do what you're told to do and not give way to your temper and stay out of a great deal of fresh air." Colin's tantrum had passed and he was as weak and worn out with crying, and this perhaps made him feel gentle. He put out his hand a little toward Mary. I am glad to say that, her own tantrum having passed, she was softened too and met him halfway with her hand, so that it was sort of making up. "I'll I'll go out with you, Mary," he said. "I shan't hate fresh air if we can find it." He remembered just in time to stop himself from saying if we can find the secret garden, and he ended, "I shall like to go out with you if Dickon will come and push my chair. I do so want to see Dickon and the fox and the crow." The nursery made the tumbled bed and shook the straightened pillows. Then she made Colin a cup of beef tea and gave a cup to Mary, who really was very glad to get it after her excitement. Mrs. Medlock and Martha gladly slipped away, and everything was neat and calm and in order. The nurse looked as if she could very gladly slip away also. She was a healthy young woman who resented being robbed of her sleep, and she yawned quite openly as she looked at Mary, who had pushed her big footstool close to the four-posted bed and was holding Colin's hand. "You must go back and get your sleep out," she said. "He'll drop off after a while if he's not too upset. Then I'll lie down myself in the next room. Would you like me to sing to you that song I heard from my ayah?" Mary whispered to Colin. His hand pulled hers gently and he turned his tired eyes on her appealingly. "Oh, yes," he answered. "It's such a soft song. I shall go to sleep in a minute." "I will put him to sleep," Mary said to the yawning nurse. "You can go if you like." "Well," said the nurse with an attempt at reluctance, "if he doesn't go to sleep in half an hour you must call me." "Very well," answered Mary. The nurse was out of the room in a minute, and as soon as she was gone Colin pulled Mary's hand again. "I almost told," he said, "but I stopped myself in time. I won't talk and I'll go to sleep, but you said you had a whole lot of nice things to tell me. Have you Do you think you have found out anything at all about the way into the secret garden?" Mary looked at his poor little tired face and swollen eyes, and her heart relented. "Yes," she answered. "I think I have, and if you will go to sleep, I will tell you tomorrow." His hand quite trembled. "Oh, Mary," he said. "Oh, Mary, if I could get into it, I think I should live to grow up. Do you suppose that instead of singing the Aya song, you could just tell me softly, as you did that first day, what you imagine it looks like inside? I am sure it will make me go to sleep." "Yes," answered Mary. "Shut your eyes." He closed his eyes and lay quite still, and she held his hand and began to speak very slowly and in a very low voice. "I think it has been left alone so long that it has grown into a lovely tangle. I think the roses have climbed and climbed and climbed until they hang from the branches and walls and creep over the ground, almost like a strange grey mist. Some of them have died, but many are alive, and when the summer comes there will be curtains and fountains of roses. I think the ground is full of daffodils and snowdrops and lilies, and iris working their way out of the dark. Now the spring has begun. Perhaps. The soft drone of her voice was making him stiller and stiller, and she saw it and went on. Perhaps they're coming up through the grass. Perhaps there are clusters of purple crocuses and gold ones even now. Perhaps the leaves are beginning to break out and uncurl, and perhaps the grey is changing and the green gauze veil is creeping and creeping over everything, and the birds are coming to look at it because it is so safe and still. And perhaps, perhaps, very softly and slowly indeed, the robin has found a mate and is building a nest. And Colin was asleep. Chapter 18. Thou Not Waste Time. Of course, Mary did not waken early the next morning. She slept late because she was tired, and when Martha brought her breakfast, she told her that though Colin was quite quiet, he was ill and feverish, as he always was after he had worn himself out with a fit of crying. Mary ate her breakfast slowly as she listened. He always he says he wishes thou would please go and see him as soon as thou can, Martha said. It's queer what a fancy he's took to thee. Thou did give it him last night for sure, didn't thou? Nobody else would dare to do it. Ay, poor lad, he's been spoiled till salt won't save him. Mother says the two worst things as can happen to a child is never to have his own way or always to have it. She doesn't know which is the worst. Thou was in a fine temper thyself too, but he says to me when I went into his room, please ask Miss Mary if she'll please come and talk to me. Think o' him saying, please, will you go, miss? I'll run and see Dickon first, said Mary. No, I'll go and see Colin first and tell him. I know what I'll tell him. With a sudden inspiration. She had her hat on when she appeared in Colin's room, and for a second he looked disappointed. He was in bed. His face was pitifully white, and there were dark circles round his eyes. I'm glad you came, he said. My head aches, and I ache all over because I'm so tired. Are you going somewhere? Mary went and leaned against his bed. I won't be long, she said. I'm going to Dickon, but I'll come back. Colin, it's something about the garden. His whole face brightened, and a little colour came into it. Oh, is it? He cried out. I dreamed about it all night. I heard you say something about grey changing into green, and I dreamed I was standing in a place all filled with trembling little green leaves, and there were birds on nests everywhere, and they looked so soft and still. I'll lie and think about it until you come back. In 5 minutes, Mary was with Dickon in their garden. The fox and the crow were with him again, and this time he had brought 2 tame squirrels. I came over on the pony this morning, he said. Aye, he's a good little chap, Jump is. I brought these 2 in my pockets. This here one, he's called Nut, and this here other one's called Shell. When he said Nut, one squirrel leaped on his right shoulder, and when he said Shell, the other one leaped onto his left shoulder. When they sat down on the grass, with Captain curled at their feet, Soot solemnly listened on a tree, and Nut and Shell nosing about close to them. It seemed to Mary that it would be scarcely bearable to leave such a delightfulness, but when she began to tell her story somehow, the look in Dickon's funny face gradually changed her mind. She could see he felt sorrier for Colin than she did. He looked up at the sky and all about him. Just listen to them birds. The world seems full of 'em, all whistling and piping, he said. Look at 'em darting about and hearken 'em calling to each other. Come springtime, come springtime seems like as if all the world's calling. The leaves is uncurling so you can see 'em, and my word, the nice smells there is about. Sniffling with his happy turned-up nose, and the poor lad lying shut up and seeing so little that he gets to thinking o' things as sets him screaming. Ay, my, we mun get him out here. We mun get him watching and listening and sniffing up the air and get him just soaked through with sunshine, and we munnot lose no time about it. When he was very much interested, he often spoke quite broad Yorkshire, though at other times he tried to modify his dialect so that Mary could better understand. But she loved his broad Yorkshire and had in fact been trying to learn to speak it herself, so she spoke a little now. Aye, that we mun, she said, which meant yes, indeed we mustn't. I'll tell thee what us'll do first, she proceeded, and Dickon grinned, because the little wench tried to twist her tongue into speaking Yorkshire. It amused him very much. He's took a greatly fancy to thee. He wants to see thee, and he wants to see certain captain. When I go back to the house to talk to him, I'll ask him if thou canna come and see him tomorrow morning, and bring the creatures with thee, and then in a bit, when there's more leaves out and happen a bud or two, we'll get him to come out, and thou shalt push him in his chair and bring him here and show him everything. When she stopped, she was quite proud of herself. She had never made a long speech in Yorkshire before, and she had remembered very well. Thou mun talk a bit your Yorkshire like that to Master Colin, Dickon chuckled. That'll make him laugh, and there's nought as good for ill folk as laughing is. Mother says she believes as half an hour's good laugh every morning could cure a chap as making ready for a typhus fever. I'm going to talk Yorkshire to him this very day, said Mary, chuckling herself. The garden had reached the time when every day and every night it seemed as if magicians were passing through it and drawing loveliness out of the earth, and the bows and wands, with bows and wands, it was hard to go away and leave it all, particularly as Nut had actually crept on to her dress and Shell had scrambled down the trunk of the apple tree they sat under, and stayed there looking at her with inquiring eyes. But she went back to the house, and when she sat down close to Colin's bed, he began to sniff as Dickon did, though not in such an experienced way. You smell like flowers and fresh things, he cried out joyously. What is it that you smell of? It's cool and warm and sweet, all at the same time. It's the wind from the moor, she said. It comes sitting on the grass under the tree with Dickon and with Captain and Soot and with Nut and Shell. It's the springtime and out of doors and sunshine it smells so greedily. She said it as broadly as she could, and you do not know how broadly Yorkshire sounds until you have heard someone speak it. Colin began to laugh. What are you doing? He said. I never heard you talk like that before. How funny it sounds. I'm giving thee a bit of Yorkshire, answered Mary triumphantly. I cannot talk as grandly as Dickon and Martha, but can thou sees I can shape a bit? Doesn't thou understand a bit of Yorkshire when thou hears it? And thou Yorkshire lad thyself, bray and born. Aye? I wonder thou'rt not ashamed of thy face. And then she began to laugh too, and they both laughed until they could not stop themselves, and they laughed until the room echoed. And Mrs. Medlock, opening the door to come in, drew back into the corridor and stood listening amazed. Well, upon my word, she said, speaking rather broad Yorkshire herself, because there was no one to hear her, and she was so astonished. Who ever heard that like? Whoever on earth would have thought it? There was so much to talk about. It seems as if Colin would never hear enough of Dickon and Captain and Soot and Nut and Shell and the pony whose name was Jump. Mary had run around into the wood with Dickon to see Jump. He was a little shaggy moor pony with thick locks hanging over his eyes, and with a pretty face and a nuzzling velvet nose. He was rather thin with living on moor grass, but though he was as tough and wiry as if the muscle in his little legs had been made of steel springs. He had lifted his head and whinnied softly at the moment he saw Dickon, and he had trotted up to him and put his head across his shoulder, and then Dickon had talked into his ear, and Jumped had talked back, and in odd little whinnies and puffs and snorts. Dickon made him give Mary his small front hoof and kiss her on the cheek with his velvet muzzle. "Does he really understand everything Dickon says?" Colin asked. "It seems as if he does," answered Mary. "Dickon says anything will understand if you're friends with it for sure. But you have to be friends for sure." Colin lay quiet a little while, and his strange grey eyes seemed to be staring at the wall. But Mary saw he was thinking. "I wish I was friends with things," he said at last, "but I am not. I never had anything to be friends with, and I can't bear people." "Can't you bear me?" asked Mary. "Yes, I can," he answered. "It's funny, but I even like you." "Ben Weatherstaff said I was like him," said Mary. "He said he'd warrant we'd both got the same nasty tempers. I think you are like him too. We are all three alike, you and I and Ben Weatherstaff. He said we were neither of us much to look at, and we were as sour as we looked. But I don't feel as sour as I used to before I knew the Robin and Dickon." "Did you feel as if though you hated people?" "Yes," answered Mary without any affectation. "I should have detested you if I had seen you before I saw the Robin and Dickon." Colin put out his thin hand and touched her. "Mary," he said, "I wish I hadn't said what I did about sending Dickon away. I hated you when you said he was like an angel, and I laughed at you, but perhaps he is. Well, it was rather funny to say it," she admitted frankly. "But his nose does turn up, and he has a big mouth, and his clothes have patches all over them, and he talks broad Yorkshire. But if an angel did come to Yorkshire and live on the moor, if there was a Yorkshire angel, I believe he'd understand the green things and know how to make them grow, and he would know how to talk to the wild creatures as Dickon does, and they'd know he was friends for sure." "I shouldn't mind Dickon looking at me," said Colin. "I want to see him." "I'm glad you said that," Mary answered, because quite suddenly it came into her mind that this was the minute to tell him. Colin knew something new was coming. "Because what?" he cried eagerly. Mary was so anxious that she got up from her stool and came to him and caught hold of both his hands. "Can I trust you?" "I trusted Dickon because birds trusted him. Can I trust you for sure? For sure," she implored. Her face was so solemn that he almost whispered his answer. "Yes, yes. Well, Dickon will come to see you tomorrow morning, and he'll bring his creatures with him." "Oh, oh!" cried Colin in delight. "But that's not all," Mary went on. almost pale with solemn excitement. The rest is better. There's a door into the garden. I found it. It's under the ivy on the wall. If he had been a strong, healthy boy, Colin could probably have shouted, "Hooray, hooray, hooray!" But he was weak and rather hysterical. His eyes grew bigger and bigger, and he gasped for breath. "Oh, Mary," he cried out with a half sob, "shall I see it? Shall I get into it? Shall I live to get into it?" And he clutched her hands and dragged her toward him. "Of course you'll see it," snapped Mary indignantly. "Of course you'll live to get into it. Don't be silly." And she was so unhysterical and natural and childish that she brought him to his senses, and he began to laugh at himself. And a few minutes afterward she was sitting on a stool again, telling him not what she imagined the secret garden to be like, but what it really was. And Colin's aches and tiredness were forgotten, and he was listening enraptured. "It is just what you thought it would be," he said at last. "It sounds just as if you had really seen it. You know, I said that when you told me first." Mary hesitated about 2 minutes and then boldly spoke the truth. "I had seen it, and I had been in," she said. "I found the key and got in weeks ago, but daren't tell you. I daren't because I was so afraid I couldn't trust you for sure." Chapter 19. It has come. Of course Dr. Craven had been sent for the morning after Colin had his tantrum. He was always sent for at once when such a thing occurred, and he was always found. When he arrived, a white shaken boy lying on his bed, sulky and still so hysterical that he was ready to break into fresh sobbing at the least word. In fact, Dr. Craven dreaded and detested the difficulties of these visits. On this occasion he was away from Misselthwaite Manor until afternoon. "How is he?" he asked Mrs. Medlock rather irritably when he arrived. "He will break a blood vessel in one of those fits some day. The boy is half insane with hysteria and self-indulgence." "Well, sir," answered Mrs. Medlock, "you'll scarcely believe your eyes when you see him. That plain, sour-faced child that's almost as bad as himself has just bewitched him. How she's done it, there's no telling. The Lord knows she's nothing to look at, and you scarcely ever hear her speak. But she did what none of us dared to. She just flew at him like a little cat last night, and stamped her feet and ordered him to stop screaming. And somehow she startled him so that he actually did stop. And this afternoon, well, just come up and see, sir. It's past crediting." The scene which Dr. Craven beheld when he entered his patient's room was indeed rather astonishing to him. As Mrs. Medlock opened the door, he heard laughing and chattering. Colin was on his sofa in his dressing gown, and he was sitting up quite straight looking at a picture in one of the garden books and talking to a plain child who at that moment could scarcely be called plain at all, because her face was so glowing with enjoyment. "Those long spires of blue ones, we'll have a lot of those," Colin was announcing. "They're called dalpiniums. Dickon says they're larkspurs, made big and grand," cried Mistress Mary. "There are clumps already." Then they saw Dr. Craven and stopped. Mary became quite still, and Colin looked fretful. "I'm sorry to hear you were ill last night, my boy," Dr. Craven said a trifle nervously. He was rather a nervous man. "I'm better now, much better," Colin answered rather like a Rajah. I'm going out in my chair in a day or two if it's fine. I want some fresh air. Dr. Craven sat down by him and felt his pulse and looked at him curiously. It must be a very fine day, he said, and you must be very careful not to tire yourself. Fresh air won't tire me, said the young Rajah. As there had been occasions where this same young gentleman had shrieked aloud with rage and had insisted that fresh air would give him cold and kill him, it is not to be wondered at that this doctor felt somewhat startled. I thought you did not like fresh air, he said. I don't when I'm by myself, replied the Rajah, but my cousin is going out with me. And the nurse, of course, suggested Dr. Craven. No, I will not have the nurse so magnificently that Mary could not help remembering how the young native prince had looked with his diamonds and emeralds and pearls stuck all over him, and great rubies on the small dark hand he had waved to command his servants to approach with salams and receive his orders. My cousin knows how to take care of me. I am always better when she is with me. She made me better last night. A very strong boy I know will push my carriage. Dr. Craven felt rather alarmed. If this tiresome, hysterical boy should chance to get well, he himself would lose all chance of inheriting Misselthwaite. But he was not an unscrupulous man. Though he was a weak one, he had and he did not intend to let him run into actual danger. He must be a strong boy and a steady boy, he said, and I must know something about him. Who is he? What's his name? It's Dickon, Mary spoke up suddenly. She felt somehow that everybody who knew the moor must know Dickon, and she was right too. She saw that in a moment Dr. Craven's serious face relaxed into a relieved smile. Oh, Dickon, he said. If it's Dickon, you'll be safe enough. He's as strong as a moor pony, is Dickon. And he's trusty, said Mary. He's the trustiest lad of Yorkshire. She had been talking Yorkshire to Colin, and she forgot herself. Did Dickon teach you that? Asked Dr. Craven, laughing outright. I'm learning it as if it was French, said Mary rather coldly. It's like a native dialect in India. Very clever people try to learn them. I like it, and so does Colin. Well, well, he said, if it amuses you, perhaps it won't do you any harm. Did you take your bromide last night, Colin? No, Colin answered. I wouldn't take it at first, and after Mary made me quiet, she talked me to sleep, in a low voice, about the spring creeping into a garden. That sounds soothing, said Dr. Craven, more perplexed than ever, and glancing sideways at Mistress Mary, sitting on a stool and looking down silently at the carpet. You are evidently better, but you must remember. I don't want to remember, interrupted the Rajah, appearing again. When I lie by myself and I remember I begin to have pains everywhere, and I think of things that make me begin to scream because I hate them so. If there was a doctor anywhere who could make you forget you were ill instead of remembering it, I would give him I would have him brought here. And he waved a thin hand which ought really to have been covered with royal signet rings made with rubies. It is because my cousin makes me forget that she makes me better. Dr. Craven had never made such a short stay after a tantrum. Usually he was obliged to remain a very long time and do a great many things. This afternoon he did not give any medicine or leave any new orders, and he was spared any disagreeable scene. When he went downstairs, he looked very thoughtful, and when he talked to Mrs. Medlock Perry, she felt that he was a much puzzled. Well, sir, she ventured, could you have believed it? It is certainly a new state of affairs, said the doctor, and there's no denying it is better than the old one. I believe Susan Sowerby's right. I do that, said Mrs. Medlock. I stopped her in a cottage on my way to Thwaite yesterday, and had a bit of a talk with her. And she says to me, well, Sarah Ann, she mayn't be a good child and she mayn't be a pretty one, but she's a child, and children needs children. We went to school together, Susan Sowerby and me. She's the best sick nurse I know, said Dr. Craven. When I find her in a cottage, I know the chances are that I shall save my patient. Mrs. Medlock smiled. She was fond of Susan Sowerby. She's got away with her, has Susan, she went on quite volubly. I've been thinking all morning of one thing she said yesterday. She says, once when I was giving the children a bit of a preach after they'd been fighting, I says to them all, when I was at school with my geography, told as the world was shaped like an orange, and I found out that before I was 10, the whole orange doesn't belong to nobody. No one owns more than his bit a quarter, and there's times it seems like there's not enough quarters to go round. But don't you, none of you think as you own the whole orange, or you'll find out you're mistaken, and you won't find it without hard knocks. What children learns from children, he says, is that there's no sense in grabbing the whole orange peel and all. If you do, you'll likely not get a quarter of it. A way of saying things, ended Mrs. Medlock, much pleased. Sometimes I've said to her, "Aye, Susan, if you was different woman and didn't talk such broad Yorkshire, I've seen times when I should have said you was clever." That night Colin slept without once wakening, and when he opened his eyes in the morning, he lay still and smiled without knowing it. Smiled because he felt so curiously comfortable it was actually nice to be awake, and he turned over and stretched his limbs luxuriously. He felt as if tight strings which had held him loosened themselves and let him go. He did not know that Dr. Craven would have said that his nerves had relaxed and rested themselves. Instead of lying and staring at the wall and wishing he had not wakened, his mind was full of the plans he and Mary had made yesterday, of pictures of the garden and of Dickon and his wild creatures. It was so nice to have things to think about, and he had not been awake more than 10 minutes when he heard feet running along the corridor, and Mary was at the door. The next minute she was in the room and had run across to his bed, bringing with her a waft of fresh air full of the scent of the morning. "You've been out! You've been out! There's that nice smell of leaves," he cried. She had been running, and her hair was loose and blown, and she was bright with the air and pink-cheeked, though he could not see it. "It's so beautiful," she said, a little breathless with her speed. "You never saw anything so beautiful. It has come. I thought it had come the other morning, but it was only coming. It's here now. It has come, the spring. Dickon says so. Has it? Cried Colin, and though he really knew nothing about it, he felt his heart beat. He actually sat up in bed. Open the window, he added, laughing half with joyful excitement and half at his own fancy. Perhaps we may hear golden trumpets. And though he laughed, Mary was at the window in a moment, and in a moment more it was opened wide, and freshness and softness and scents and bird songs were pouring through. That's fresh air, she said. Lie on your back and draw in long breaths of it. That's what Dickon does when he's lying on the moor. He says he feels it in his veins and it makes him strong, and he feels as if he could live forever and ever. Breathe in and breathe it. She was only repeating what Dickon had told her, but she caught Colin's fancy. Forever and ever. Does it make him feel like that? He said, and he did as she told him, drawing in long, deep breaths over and over again until he felt that something quite new and delightful was happening to him. Mary was at his bedside again. Things are crowding up out of the earth, she ran on in a hurry. And there are flowers uncurling and buds on everything, and the green veil has covered nearly all the grey, and the birds are in such a hurry about their nests for fear they may be too late, that some of them are even fighting for places in the secret garden, and the rose bushes look as weak can be. And there are primroses in the lanes and woods, and the seeds are up. And Dickon has brought the fox and the crow and the squirrels and the newborn lamb. And the seeds, and she paused for breath. The newborn lamb Dickon had found 3 days before lying by its dead mother among the gorse bushes on the moor. It was not the first motherless lamb he had found, and he knew what to do with it. He had taken it to the cottage, wrapped it in his jacket, and he had let it lie near the fire, and had fed it with warm milk. It was a soft thing with a darling silly baby face, and legs rather long for its body. Dickon had carried it over the moor in his arms, and its feeding bottle was in his pocket with a squirrel. And when Mary sat under a tree with its limp warmness huddled on her lap, she had felt as if she were too full of strange joy to speak. A lamb, a lamb, a living lamb who lay on your lap like a baby. She was describing it with great joy, and Colin was listening and drawing in long breaths of air when the nurse entered. She started a little at the sight of the open window. She had sat stifling in the room many a warm day because her patients were sure that opening windows gave people cold. Are you sure you're not chilly, Master Colin? She inquired. No, was the answer. I'm breathing long breaths of fresh air. It makes you strong. I'm going to get up to the sofa for breakfast. My cousin will have breakfast with me. The nurse went away, concealing a smile. To give the order for 2 breakfasts, she found the servants' hall a more amusing place than an invalid's chamber, and just now everybody wanted to hear the news from upstairs. There was a great deal of joking about the unpopular young recluse, who, as the cook said, has found his master and good for him. The servants' hall had been very tired of the tantrums, and the butler, who was a man with a family, had more than once expressed his opinion that the invalid would be all the better for a good hiding. When Colin was on his sofa and the breakfast for 2 was put upon the table, he made an announcement on the nurse. in his most Rajah-like manner. A boy and a fox and a crow and 2 squirrels and a newborn lamb are coming to see me this morning. I want them brought upstairs as soon as they come, he said. You are not to begin playing with the animals in the servants' hall and keep him there. I want him here. The nurse gave a slight gasp and tried to conceal it with a cough. Yes, sir, she answered. I'll tell you what to do, what you can do, added Colin, waving his hand. You can tell Martha to bring them here. The boy is Martha's brother. His name is Dickon, and he's an animal charmer. I hope the animals won't bite, Master Colin, said the nurse. I told you he was a charmer, said Colin austerely. Charmers animals never bite. They are snake charmers in India, said Mary, and they can put their snakes' heads in their mouths. Goodness, shuddered the nurse. They ate their breakfast with the morning air pouring in upon them. Colin's breakfast was a very good one, and Mary watched him with serious interest. Okay, I'm gonna stop there for tonight. Thank you that we could sit together. I really appreciate it. If you need me again, I'll be back soon. And until then, I hope you take good care of your heart and your mind. I hope you find joy in simple things. It matters because you matter, and you deserve to grow the light inside of you. Good night.